She walked into the night thinking it was just another conversation. Minutes later, her phone went silent forever. No screams, no witnesses, just a dark road and a truck caught on camera leaving the scene. What happened in those final moments is so disturbing that even after 2 people were convicted, the truth is still buried, and her body has never been found.
She was so full of personality. She lit up a room when she walked in. She was precious.
The night Heather Elvis disappeared didn't begin with fear. It began like any ordinary evening in Myrtle Beach, a place known more for vacations and ocean views than for mysteries that refuse to die. At just 20 years old, Heather was building a life that felt entirely her own. She worked long shifts as a waitress, studied cosmetology, and dreamed of becoming a professional makeup artist. She had independence, ambition, and a close bond with her family, especially her father, Terry, who she spoke to almost daily. On December 17, 2013, Heather went on a date with a man she had recently met. Throughout the evening, she stayed in touch with her friend Brianna, sharing updates in real time, laughing, enjoying herself. At one point, she even sent a photo to her father, proudly showing that she was learning how to drive a manual car. It was a small moment, but one that captured exactly who she was. By the end of the night, she was dropped back at her apartment just before midnight. Everything seemed normal. There was no sign that anything was wrong, no indication that this would be the last confirmed moment anyone would ever see her alive. But just hours later, something changed. At around 1:35 in the morning, Heather received a call from a payphone. It wasn't random, it was deliberate. On the other end was a man from her past, someone she had tried to move on from, Sidney Moore. Their relationship had been complicated from the beginning. He was nearly 2 decades older than her, married, and deeply entangled in a life that Heather was never meant to be part of. What started as flirtation had escalated into something physical, something secret, and when it ended, it didn't end cleanly. Sidney's wife, Tammy, had discovered the affair months earlier. What followed wasn't just anger, it was obsession. Heather became a target, humiliated, harassed, and blamed. Calls were forced, insults delivered, pressure applied from every angle until Heather tried to walk away completely. But that night, Sidney reached out again. After that call, everything spiraled. Heather phoned her friend Brianna, visibly upset, conflicted. Sidney had told her he left his wife. He wanted to see her again. It sounded like closure, or maybe a second chance. Brianna warned her not to go, but Heather hesitated, and that hesitation would become one of the last decisions she ever made. At 3:16 a.m., Heather and Sidney spoke again. 4 minutes. That was all it took to set the final events into motion. Moments later, her phone began moving. Location data showed her heading toward an isolated place, Peachtree Boat Landing. A dark, quiet area surrounded by water and woods, not somewhere you accidentally end up in the middle of the night. At the exact same time, surveillance cameras captured something chilling. A dark Ford F-150 truck, registered to Sidney Moore, driving toward that very location. By 3:30 a.m., Heather tried calling him again. No answer. She tried again and again. Her calls became more urgent, more desperate. Then at 3:42 a.m., everything stopped. Her phone went silent. Forever. Just minutes later, that same truck was seen leaving the area, heading back toward the Moore residence. Hours passed. Then days. Heather didn't return home. She didn't answer calls. She didn't contact anyone. And then came the discovery that turned concern into terror. Her car was found abandoned at the boat landing. Locked. Lights off. Personal belongings still inside. It looked as if she had simply stepped out for a moment and vanished into thin air. For her father, Terry, the realization hit instantly. Something was wrong. Deeply wrong. Desperate for answers, he began calling every number linked to her recent activity. One number stood out. She had called it 9 times that night. When he dialed it, the response he received was aggressive, hostile, completely unexpected. The man on the other end cursed him, dismissed him, and showed no concern for Heather at all. That man was Sidney Moore.
When's the last either last night or night before, I can't remember.
What's your relationship with her?
There is no relationship.
There
was a relationship. I broke it off.
At any point, did you go down around the Peachtree Landing there?
No.
So there's nothing that's going to show up?
At that point, investigators began to piece together the timeline, and what they found didn't point to coincidence. It pointed to intent. Surveillance footage placed Sidney at a Walmart shortly before the disappearance, purchasing a pregnancy test. Minutes later, he was seen using a payphone, the same one that contacted Heather. He had even removed his SIM card before making the call, ensuring it couldn't be traced back to his personal phone. This wasn't random. This was planned. As investigators dug deeper, the picture became darker. Rumors had been circulating that Heather might have been pregnant. Her co-workers noticed changes. A possible test had been taken. And suddenly, the motive began to take shape. A married man, a jealous wife, and a young woman who may have been carrying a secret that could destroy everything. The investigation soon led directly to Sidney and Tammy Moore. But instead of silence, they fought back. On social media, Tammy began shaping a narrative, one where she and her husband were the victims, one where Heather was painted as reckless, unstable, and responsible for her own disappearance. And disturbingly, people believed it. The community began to split. Some supported the Moores, others stood with Heather's family. The truth became buried under opinions, accusations, and manipulation. But evidence doesn't lie. When police searched the Moore residence, they didn't find Heather, but they found something just as telling. Security footage from inside the home showed the couple cleaning their truck, meticulously, scrubbing the front seats, wiping down every surface, and then burning the rags they used. It wasn't panic. It was cleanup. Soon after, both Sidney and Tammy were arrested and charged. The case moved forward, but it wouldn't be simple. In 2016, Sidney's first trial for kidnapping ended in a mistrial. The jury was divided, the truth still just out of reach. But then came a turning point. In a separate trial for obstruction of justice, Sidney admitted something critical. He confessed to using the payphone that night, deliberately hiding his identity. That lie alone was enough to convict him, earning him 10 years in prison. But the biggest revelation was still coming. In 2019, during Sidney's kidnapping trial, a surprise witness took the stand. His own cousin. He testified that Sidney had once shown him a photo of Heather, her face scratched, blood visible, lifeless. And according to his testimony, Sidney said she was already dead. That moment changed everything. The jury didn't hesitate. Sidney Moore was found guilty and sentenced to 30 years in prison. Tammy Moore had already been convicted and sentenced to the same. 2 people held responsible, 2 lives locked away. And yet, the most important question remains unanswered. What actually happened at Peachtree Landing? Because despite the convictions, despite the evidence, despite everything, Heather Elvis has never been found. No body, no final confirmation, no closure, just silence. Sidney himself would later admit something chilling. When asked if he could give the family answers, he said anything he told them would be a lie, that there was nothing he could say to give them closure. And that might be the most disturbing part of all. A family left waiting, a truth buried somewhere no one can reach, and a young woman whose final moments remain trapped in darkness. To this day, Heather's father continues searching, refusing to give up. holding on to the belief that one day, somehow, she will be brought home. But until that happens, this case remains suspended between what we know and what we may never know. A story of obsession, manipulation, and a night that ended in silence. The kind of case that doesn't just disturb you, it stays with you.